On Sean Chandler Talks About, I'm known for ranking movies in franchises, but I'm not really known for ranking movie franchises. So today it's a Top 10 Tuesday. I'm going to share my 10 favorite movie franchises of all time. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your favorite movie franchises of all time. Of course, our lists are going to be totally different because this isn't intended to be the objective right list of best franchises. These are my personal favorites, the ones that I would take with me if I was stranded on an island with some solar panels and a waterproof TV and waterproof Blu-ray player. These are the franchises I would want to have on that island. One thing before we get started, I have a companion video to this with 11 more of my favorite movie franchises of all time. It's over on my Patreon page. Join at any level and you can unlock that video plus so much more, and let's get started. Kicking things off at number 11 is the Terminator franchise. I know I said it was a Top 10 Tuesday, but I had 11 franchises I wanted to talk about in this video. So for me, I just love the Terminator movies. Granted, there's two great ones. There's one that's highly divisive, and then there's like three that most everyone thinks are pretty disappointing. But those first two films are just absolute classics of the genre that built this incredible world. The first one kind of being a lower budget sci-fi action horror film that plays kind of like a slasher but has great characters and a great mythology. And then T2 is one of the best blockbusters of all time, one of the best sequels of all time that just ups everything that was great about the first film, adds in more emotion, even stronger characters, and just is a fantastic film. And then you get the other four Terminator movies. For me, even a bad Terminator movie I can really enjoy. Stuff like Terminator Genesis that's just so wacky, I can just watch that as weird, big budget Terminator fanfiction and have a lot of fun with it. I just love going to this world, this mythology, these characters, and even when it's wacky, I can still have a good bit of fun with it. Bringing us into our top 10 is Toy Story, Pixar's original film that turned into just a fantastic set of films. All along the way, I was one of those people that was always kind of critical of the fact that they just kind of kept going back to the toy chest, trying to do more sequels, but every single time, they pulled it off. So they managed through this franchise to kind of discover this sense of nostalgia that can be very emotional for adults, but at the same time made characters that are fun for children. Especially when this fourth one came out, I just thought it was a terrible idea. I didn't like the trailers, and then I saw it and realized what they were doing with it, and they found that angle to tell a story that was worth being told, and they've continued to do that for 25 years now. That is truly incredible that they made true family entertainment. Next up, the Planet of the Apes remake trilogy. So back about 10 years ago, they announced that they were going to remake Planet of the Apes, but it was going to be kind of like a prequel and this reimagining of the franchise. And I was as critical as anyone. I didn't think it was a very good idea. When Rise of the Planet of the Apes came out in theaters, I didn't even go and see it because even the trailers themselves didn't really win me over. Then one day on a whim, I went out and rented it, and I just fell in love with what they created and realizing that Caesar was actually the star of the film and the central character. And the conflict was created not by evil mustache twirling villains, but instead by competing value sets. And that's what they continued throughout each of these films. Not that there weren't villainous people, not that there weren't people and creatures that did evil things, but at the core of the movies, what you had was people trying to survive, people trying to do the right thing, and that came them in conflict with others. And that's where you have real drama that's authentic. And even though they have apes on horseback with machine guns battling tanks, they're movies that touch on real powerful stuff and have something to say, and Caesar was one of my favorite leading characters of the last decade. Number 8, the Dark Knight Trilogy. Christopher Nolan took the Batman mythology, tried to make it ground level and take inspiration not from the rest of the comic book genre, but from actual crime thrillers, and in doing so, created something really special that has been praised by audiences and critics ever since these movies debuted. For me, I personally love origin stories, and with Batman Begins, finally we got a very thorough examination of the journey from Bruce Wayne in that alley to the hero trying to save a city. Then it continues onward into The Dark Knight that just has a much more complex story, has all these themes woven throughout it, great performances, and has obviously one of the most highly praised comic book villains of all time that won Heath Ledger an Oscar. And then it closed out with The Dark Knight Rises that I think is the weakest of the bunch, but it's weakest while trying to do something very ambitious. It tries to tell this massive story, and I think there's a couple little things where they have to cheat to put the pieces together, but it closes things out on an appropriately epic scale, and it is still great on its own terms. Christopher Nolan really did something special with this trilogy. Then we have Star Trek, and when I say the Star Trek franchise, I mean all of them. The original series movies, next-gen movies, as well as the reboot trilogy. I grew up watching Star Trek. Some of my earliest childhood memories of watching movies with my family is sitting down to watch Star Trek for the Voyage Home and being freaked out by the probe, and I have always enjoyed all the characters throughout all of these films. Now, not all the films are great. Some of them are actually quite bad. There are certainly uneven elements that can be criticized, but that doesn't change the fact that anytime a Star Trek movie is announced, I'm excited to see what they're going to do with it. And one of the forgotten great trilogies of all time is Star Trek 2 through 4, which is designed as a trilogy that has plot lines that start in 2, that close out in 4. And that's one of my top 10 favorite franchises of all time. But then beyond that, I really loved the reboot when they did it. I don't know, 11 years ago. So Star Trek always will have a special place in my heart and has brought me much joy in my life. Then we have Scream. Whenever people ask what is my favorite horror franchise, I always say Scream. And there's a number of different reasons for that. First off, I think it just works as a clever twist on the slasher genre because you have the killer that's running around mowing down teenagers, but then it has that whodunit element side of it that I think just adds a little bit of nuance into the story, kind of keeps you intrigued on a deeper level than when you know that it's that person right there. And so with each of the films, even some of the weaker ones, it's interesting to try and figure out what exactly is going on in the backstory behind all it. Second one, it's a little bit of a deconstruction of the horror genre or the slasher genre during the 80s and that time period. Has a lot of fun with the movies itself. It's very meta, self-referential. And so while it works as just a slasher film, it also works as a commentary on the slasher genre that's quite funny. Then, of course, there's the simple fact that this was the horror franchise and the type of horror movies that were coming out during my formative years, the late 90s. That's when I was in high school. So these are the ones that I started to go see in the theaters by myself and just kind of fell in love with horror, largely because of these films. Another great set of characters, a great twist with the whodunit, so this is my favorite. In fifth place, Indiana Jones. For me, the top 2 adventure films of all time are Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. For that matter, I think that Temple of Doom is pretty fantastic too, but with these movies, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg just came up with the ultimate adventure that provide kind of the ultimate escapism for me. Making them a period piece and setting them kind of during World War II, I think creates a certain degree of timelessness to the films that have made them age incredibly well. They're paced so nicely. For the first one being 40 years old, it just moves at such a modern pace. And these movies are just jam-packed with memorable sequences. There's so many things that are memorable. And then even they found that way with Last Crusade of like, how do you continue making this franchise great? They bring in James Bond as Indiana Jones's father, and they have such good chemistry. We also have the fourth film. I don't hate it, but obviously it's the weakest of the bunch and has quite a few problems. And perhaps if the fourth one was better, this one might have made it a little bit higher up on this list. But just such a great set of films that are so rewatchable. Next up, Back to the Future, the time-traveling trilogy about Marty McFly getting stuck in the past, breaking the timeline, and spending 3 movies trying to get back to the present without messing things up too badly. That original film, just something magic happened while they were writing it, during the production, where it seems like it's a near-perfect film that they just thought through everything as they were making this film, just makes it so much better, so much more rewatchable, and the whole script is like that, whether the characters, the humor, the characterizations, the casting just seems to be kind of like that lightning in a bottle of people that have perfect chemistry inside of it. Then they move into the sequels that I don't think they quite live up to the original, but they're great follow-ups that expand the universe into different things with this time travel sorts of ideas. So we get this interesting look at the future 2015 and what Robert Zemeckis thought it might look like. Then we also go back into the first movie, which is a very interesting thing to do in a sequel. And then they make it a Western in the third film. And that's really what you want a franchise to do, where you expand things, you give the audience more of what they loved about the first film, but in a totally different way. And that's what these films did so well. Add to that just a fantastic score from Alan Silvestri, and you get one of the best trilogies of all time. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to share your favorite movie franchises down below in the comment section. Also remember, over on my Patreon page, I have a companion video to this with 11 more of my favorite movie franchises of all time. And if you're wondering where are certain big franchises that aren't on this list, a lot of them are over on that other list. A few of them you'll be surprised aren't on either list, but join at any level and you can see that other video and much more. And if you just want more content from me after this video, also I've ranked every single one of these franchises, the movies inside of them at some point in time. So if you want more about any franchises on this list, I've got a video about it. In third place is Star Wars. This is the franchise that really made me fall in love with movies and kind of ignited my imagination from a young age. I had all the toys, I had the storybooks, I even had the cassette tapes that went along with the storybooks. These are the movies that kind of made me fall in love with movies and kind of why I do what I do today. Then even in the late 90s when the Star Wars Special Edition was coming out to theaters, I was tracking all of that. That's when I started to track movie news and things like that. And I even had a Star Wars website in the late 90s that I kind of kept with just a little bit. And all the way up until just a few months ago, new Star Wars movies have been coming out, and it's something now that I can share with my children. Now, as a film franchise, the movies are pretty uneven. A great number of them have disappointed me a good bit, and with kind of what they did with Rise of Skywalker to close out the Skywalker saga, I don't have the best Star Wars taste in my mouth right now, but that doesn't change the fact that Star Wars has been so important to my life, and the movies, the original trilogy, were just so great, remain truly great, and it's a world I always am optimistic that they'll put more great Star Wars out there for me to enjoy, and now for me to share with my children. Our runner-up is the Rocky franchise. I've said it many times before on my channel, but Rocky Balboa is probably my favorite movie character of all time. Sylvester Stallone is probably my favorite actor of all time, and this is a set of movies I've kind of been watching on loop for about 25 years now. They've done so many kind of wacky things with this one. It got super 80s with Rocky 3 and Rocky 4. And then they announced that they were going to do a spin-off set of movies with Creed's son. I thought that was a terrible idea, and they managed to pull it off and continue to find fresh new ways to create these underdog stories that just get you to cheer behind the protagonist, whether it's Rocky, whether it's Adonis. And one of the things I love when a franchise can do is where you get to see a character over the passage of time. And one of the ultimate examples of that is Rocky, who you see him from kind of this lonely single guy as he falls in love, has children, becomes a famous boxer. You see him on the kind of decline in his career. You see him after his career. And then you see him kind of as an older mentor who's kind of all alone. Once again, I love it when a franchise can do that. And for me, it has absolutely paid off. And maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but the first movie I saw in the theater after I got married, actually on our honeymoon, my wife and I went to go see Rocky Balboa in the theater. So that's what we did on our honeymoon. I don't know what other people do. But coming in first place is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. When it comes to franchises that are both quality and prolific, there's no one in the same category as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As of right now, there's 23 movies and every single one of them is fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Now you can debate whether that should have been the case with several of them, and you wouldn't be wrong to do so, but I think even at its worst, Marvel movies are still watchable. They've managed to create this vast shared universe that takes place over decades. It's on Earth, it's up in space, they've got political spy thrillers, they've got heist movies, and they've made it feel consistent. In and of itself, that is an incredible achievement. Add to that, they were able to kind of crescendo with Infinity War and Endgame, where they pulled it off. They managed to actually kind of plant these little seeds, these ideas, and build towards something that paid off properly, that justified that last hour of Endgame, that is basically an hour straight of the ultimate fan service of all time. That is pretty remarkable. And add to that, these are movies that I thoroughly enjoy. Also, they're responsible for me growing this whole YouTube channel. So they're very special in my place because it's allowed me to have this kind of career as movie reviewer guy that gets to talk about movies with all of you wonderful people. And now, once again, as a parent, I get to share these movies with my kids, which is really pretty cool to be able to do that. So for me, without question, when it comes to which franchise would I take to an island if I was stranded there, which one has so many movies that mean so much to me, easily at number one is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Remember, if you want to see that list of 11 more of my favorite franchises, you can do that at my Patreon page. The link is down below in the description. And I have ranked all of these franchises individually before, and so you can look up those videos by doing a little bit of a search. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.